Let's move to page 5 of the Standard on Sunday. Staying with Jubilee still, battle for Nairobi seats threatens to rip Jubilee right in the middle. This is a kind of a different battle that your party is facing, Brian. The two camps, the former Gatanga MP Peter Kenneth and the one calling themselves Team Nairobi with Gideon Mbuvi, Sonko, Johnson Sakaja, Dennis Waweru, and Bishop Margaret Wanjiru. Dismas, what gives here? I mean, are we seeing another scenario like 2013 where the TNA side failed to agree and they ended up splitting the votes and Kidero akapita katikati?
Among all the persons who want to be governor for Nairobi from Jubilee, none has got political capital of their own. All of them, they're just dancing in the sky. They don't have political capital. The people are going to decide who's going to be...
Even Sonko?
Sonko doesn't have political capital because Sonko got 200,000 votes more than President Kenyatta, but he did not transfer his votes to President Kenyatta. So it's very easy for President Kenyatta to ask him to take a walk. So all those candidates are going to run on Mr. Kenyatta's political capital as well as Ruto. Whoever Kenyatta and Ruto decide to be governor for Nairobi on a Jubilee ticket, that's going to be the candidate. And already a decision has been taken that it's going to be Peter Ken. So for the rest of the so-called Team Nairobi, I think they're just trying to condition themselves to accept reality. Because the president and his deputy have sat down over a cup of coffee and have said Peter Ken is going to be our candidate for governor, Millie Omanga is going to be our candidate for women rep, and Sonko has been told that if he's not careful, he may even lose the position for the Senate. And there's no way Sonko would ever imagine that he has more political capital than President Kenyatta in Nairobi. That will be a very wild dream. So at the end of the day, and you can confirm that the Jubilee Party has indicated in their instruments of power that for them to elect a candidate is through nomination or consensus. And for consensus, it's not indicated in black and white. And Ishmael is a lawyer. It's not very elaborate that this is what must happen. Provided the president and his deputy have agreed it's Peter Ken, the rest have to dance along. And if, say, Sonko or Sakaja or Waweru imagine that they're going to stage a coup and walk out with supporters, they don't have supporters. For instance, do you imagine that Waweru can tell the Kikuyu community in Nairobi that don't vote for Peter Ken because I've taken issues with the president? That will not work. And remember, when you become president, you've got a lot of powers. And all these candidates have got issues around corruption hanging on their necks. Others even have got pending cases in court. I'll not be surprised if Sonko tries to kick trouble. He finds Keriako Tobiko landing on him shortly before the elections, and he'll find himself spending a lot of time at either Milimani commercial courts or the criminal courts.
What about all this honesty we see in the face of the president and William Ruto saying we are not going to support any candidate? I don't know how he gets this
Ishmael, if you ever believe what politicians say in Kenya, then Kenya would be in the level of Singapore. You remember the manifesto? Do you remember the kind of trains they promised us? What you read in the manifesto. So if they were to keep their word, then Kenya would be a first one.
You know, Brian, is what Dismas saying, is that the official lineup?
I don't know what Dismas smokes in the morning, but what I can say is this.
It's a good product.
Whatever you are seeing is normal competition. And that can tell you which party is popular in Nairobi if people are fighting fiercely for that ticket. And it's normal in any competition that people will throw tantrums, people will say 1, 2, 3 things. But as the president has said and the deputy president, Jubilee Party primaries will be free and fair. And what Dismas has said about how we select our candidates, every party right now has submitted their nomination rules to IEBC. And anyone can go and check what's in there. So for Nairobi, it's purely competition.
Right, you say it's healthy competition, but the Nairobi senator and Bishop Margaret Wanjiru have said if they are not happy with the primaries, they will walk out. And if they're not, they sense that things are not going to be free and fair, they will walk out and vie for government.
You know,
is that going to split the party?
In politics, people say all sorts of things. Like, how do you define free and fair? Because if you lose squarely and you say it was not free and fair, you just interest yourself by saying it's not free and fair. What you are seeing there, it's fear for competition. It was a walkthrough to all of them, then and the entrance of Peter Kenneth brought them together to try and fight him back as an outsider. But you can see the good bishop herself came from ODM the other day. Mike Sonko was in Kenya the other day. So these are just competition, purely competition. Whatever they are saying is to hive off the competition.
Doctor, do you agree with what Dismas is saying, that the president and the deputy have already agreed on this. Remember, Peter Kenneth has been touted as a potential heir to the throne in terms of 2022 politics. Would Ruto be agreeable to that?
I don't know if they have agreed on the candidate, but I would agree that, with Dismas that for Nairobi it will be guided democracy. You will not have a scenario where you subject these people or the candidates into a nomination exercise. The reason being that if you subject a county like Nairobi to a nomination exercise, even with the smart card, you face the danger of infiltration by the NASA side, and you likely see NASA having a hand into who becomes the candidate of Nairobi, and that is actually what happened in 2013 to land on a candidate like Waititu at that particular time, that Kidero had some hand, in my view, into that candidature. And so it is likely. I don't know if they have agreed, because you remember last Sunday, Waweru found some space to be next to the deputy president, and of course, as you're saying, some 2022 thinking maybe, especially in the deputy president's quarters, as to the role or the positioning of Peter Kenneth. But there's also another group that may have had an influence or will have a lot of influence when it comes to the candidate who will be the Jubilee's candidate in Nairobi. And that is the Mount Kenya Forum, or I don't know what the name they call themselves.
Mount Kenya Mafia.
No, not Mafia. But there is a lot of interest in terms of business interest that this forum has had in terms of Nairobi, and they have had an interest in ensuring that the candidate who becomes the Nairobi governor is one whom they feel can actually secure
Dr. A lot of people seem to think that Mount Kenya group have a lot of influence.
Correct. And that influence is going to manifest itself when the candidate is selected. It is not likely to be a selection exercise where you allow the masses to have an influence in that particular nomination exercise. That influence is going to be informed by largely business interests, and those business interests are those that are largely going to skew towards the Murang'a side, and that is where Peter Kenneth may likely come on board. But of course, that having been said, it is important to note that Jubilee is seeking support from other quarters on the national front. And so Jubilee will be asking itself, if we are going to have a candidate who is from Mount Kenya, who is the Nairobi governor, and we also have a presidential candidate who is from the Mount Kenya region, how do we pitch in the other fronts, in the other places, in the other countrywide? And that should be able to play out very well when they are selecting the candidate as well.
Ishmael,
Ben, now you say, this is, now you see, these mythologies are actually our biggest problem in the country. This is Nairobi. It's as good as a sub-country, quote unquote. This is a metropolitan city with a lot of educated people, the cream of society being here. They still believe that somebody somewhere is practicing some magic behind very intelligent citizens in Nairobi. I don't believe this. What I know is there, and this is politics. You don't expect to go into elections like you're walking into a mosque or a church for somebody to tell you without questioning. There will be, of course, like somebody said, it's politics. The head of state has an interest to see that his party wins in Nairobi. The same thing NASA has. But I don't think there's this deep, magical movement of, backroom way of trying to maneuver so that Peter Kenneth becomes the sole candidate. No. Remember, and I said this before, the governors, elsewhere, the governors in all these counties want to win. Mm-hmm. There's no way they're going to concentrate on what happens in Nairobi so that they lose in their Kirinyaga or Nyamira or in Mombasa. So I think this is pure politics.
These gentlemen seem to be looking at you like you're from
Mars. But allow me to say something.
Then I come to Dr.
It would be naive for Ishmael to imagine that our politics is run according to studies in political science. That you place everything on the table and you ask voters to come on board. Majority of the voters in Kenya are irrational. When Raila Odinga tells the people to go and vote for NASA, Raila did not have a consultative forum with all ODM supporters countrywide to tell them, we are now going to NASA, or Musalia Mudavadi, or Kalonzo, or Wetangula. Those three gentlemen met for a cup of tea, and they said, we are forming NASA. And everybody else, right now, if you get somebody from Lunyanza, they'll be defending NASA to the high heavens. They'll be saying, this is the way to go. The same is happening for Jubilee in Nairobi. Jubilee in Nairobi does not exist in the absence of President Kenyatta and the deputy. So their supporters in Nairobi right now they're seated having tea and mandazis, waiting for instructions. And it's all about what are called guided democracy. If you're just thinking that the Jubilee Nairobi will wake up one day in the morning, go and cast their ballots, and Mr. Mbogo will tell you there's a lot of mobilization. Voters have been brought from as far as Kisii to Nairobi to come and vote for a particular person.
Just so that he doesn't make a wrong statement, look at Kisii, for example. You call it a battleground with very hard head. Sorry, I'm not accusing anybody, but strong or very well-positioned heads. Here, Raila comes and tells Kisii, I want votes. There's no stone throwing. Here, the head of state comes in and says, I want votes. There's no stone throwing. I expect Nairobi to be so balanced with very well-educated men and women who run the economy of this country to be told by the head of state that I humbly suggest that you vote in Peter Kenneth. And Raila will come in and say, no, 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 I suggest that you vote in Honorable Kidero. But that should not result into these assumptions that it is already cast in stone that it is Peter Kenneth, and if you don't vote him in, then we are not going to support him.
That's first one politics.
Plus, Ben, in reality, you know, if you have 5 candidates going to a competition, you are sure 4 will lose and 1 will gain. So I'm sure some of them are coming to that realization, and they're trying to get out of the race.
Unfortunately, Ishmael seems not to have looked at the numbers very well. The numbers of the people whom we are talking about, level-headed, the professionals and so forth, those Facebook voters will not queue to go and vote. The people who will vote are the people who are in Kibera, the people who are in Mathare North, the people who are in those Kariobangi and Huruma and so forth, people who are waiting to be given direct instructions as to who will become the candidate, no matter. Like, look at how Kidero has performed in Nairobi. The person who pitched in 2013 as somebody who is going to transform Nairobi into a middle-income, state-of-the-art city. Has he performed? No, he has not performed. But let me tell you and assure you, and those kind of people, a few weeks ago, I sat with top executives of blue chip companies here, and I asked them, do you think is going to become, whom are you going to vote for? And I can tell you those guys, because they're inclined to NASA, they were very categorical. We are going to vote for Kidero. Why? Because the NASA has said it is likely to be Kidero. So this thing, in terms of voting, does not expect rationality at any particular point.
Let's continue this conversation, focusing on another part of the country. This